congenial. I am the youngest of 6, and my brothers, being considerably older, had left the nest some time before. My brothers were successful merchants and professional men. One and all, they rejected father's studies. I was left, then, to be the prop of my father's declining years. As I have said, the life suited me. It allowed me to develop my talents for scholarship. But let not the gentle reader suppose that I was ill-equipped for the practical necessities of life. My father was disinclined toward practicalities. It was left to me to bully the baker and badger the butcher, which I did, if I may say so, quite effectively. After Mr. Hodgkins the butcher, Pierrot gave me no trouble. My father died eventually, if one may use so precise a word for the process that took place. One might say that he gradually shriveled up and ran down. The rumour, put about by a pert housemaid, that he had actually been dead for 2 days before anyone noticed, is a complete exaggeration. I must admit, however, that he might have passed away at any point during the 5 hours I spent with him in his study on that particular afternoon. He was leaning back in his big leather chair, meditating, as I assumed, and when, warned by some premonition, I hurried to his side, his wide-open eyes held the same expression of mild inquiry with which they had always regarded me. It seemed to me quite a respectable and comfortable way in which to pass on. It came as no surprise to anyone to discover that he had left his property to me, the aforesaid prop, and the only one of his children who had not an income of its own. My brothers accepted this tolerantly, as they had accepted my devoted service to Papa. They did not explode until they learned that the property was not a paltry sum, but a fortune of £500,000. They had made a common mistake in assuming that an absent-minded scholar is necessarily a fool. My father's disinclination to argue with Mr. Hodgkins the butcher was due not to lack of ability, but to disinterest. He was very much interested in investments, change, and those other mysterious matters that produce wealth. He had conducted his business affairs with the same reticence that marked his habits in general, and he died, to the surprise of all, a wealthy man. When this fact became known, the explosion occurred. My eldest brother, James, went so far as to threaten legal proceedings on the basis of unsound mind and undue influence. This ill-considered burst of temper, which was characteristic of James, was easily stopped by Mr. Fletcher, Papa's excellent solicitor. Other attempts ensued. I was visited by streams of attentive nieces and nephews, assuring me of their devotion, which had been demonstrated over the past years by their absence. Sisters-in-law invited me in the most affectionate phrases to share their homes. I was warned in the strongest terms against fortune-hunters. The warnings were not unselfish. They were, however, unnecessary. A middle-aged spinster, for I was at that time 32 years of age, and I scorned to disguise the fact, who has never received a proposal of marriage, must be a simpleton if she fails to recognize the sudden acquisition of a fortune as a factor in her new popularity. I was not a simpleton. I had always known myself to be plain. The transparent attempts of my kin and of various unemployed gentlemen to win my regard aroused in me a grim amusement. I did not put them off. Quite the contrary. I encouraged them to visit, and laughed up my sleeve at their clumsy efforts. Then it occurred to me that I was enjoying them too much. I was becoming cynical, and it was this character development that made me decide to leave England. Not, as some malicious persons have intimated, a fear of being overborne. I had always wanted to travel. Now I decided I would see all the places Father had studied, the glory that was Greece and the grandeur that was Rome, Babylon and 100-gated Thebes. Once I had made this decision, it did not take me long to prepare for the journey. I made my arrangements with Mr. Fletcher, and received from him a proposal of marriage, which I refused with the same good humour that had characterized the offer. At least he was honest. "I thought it worth a try," he remarked calmly. "Nothing ventured, nothing gained," I agreed. Mr. Fletcher studied me thoughtfully for a moment. "Miss Amelia, may I ask, in my professional capacity now, whether you have any inclinations toward matrimony?" "None. I disapprove of matrimony as a matter of principle." Mr. Fletcher's pepper-and-salt eyebrows lifted. I added, "For myself, that is. I suppose it is well enough for some women. What else can the poor things do? But why should any independent, intelligent female choose to subject herself to the whims and tyrannies of a husband? I assure you I have yet to meet a man as sensible as myself." "I can well believe that," said Mr. Fletcher. He hesitated for a moment. I fancied I could see him struggle with the desire to make an unprofessional statement. He lost the struggle. "Why do you wear such frightful clothes?" he burst out. "If it is to discourage suitors—" "Really, Mr. Fletcher!" I exclaimed. "I beg your pardon," said the lawyer, wiping his brow. "I cannot think what came over me." "Nor can I. As for my clothes, they suit the life I lead. The current fashions are impractical for an active person. Skirts so tight one must toddle like an infant. Bodices boned so firmly it is impossible to draw a deep breath. And bustles! Of all the idiotic contrivances foisted upon helpless womankind, the bustle is certainly the worst. I wear them since it is impossible to have a gown made without them, but at least I can insist on sensible dark fabrics and a minimum of ornament. What a fool I should look in puffs and frills and crimson satin, or a gown trimmed with dead birds like one I saw." "And yet," said Mr. Fletcher, smiling, "I have always thought you would look rather well in puffs and frills and crimson satin." The opportunity to lecture had restored my good humour. I returned his smile, but I shook my head. "Give it up, Mr. Fletcher. You cannot flatter me. I know the catalogue of my faults too accurately. I am too tall, I am too lean in some regions, and too amply endowed in others. My nose is too large, my mouth is too wide, and the shape of my chin is positively masculine. Sallow complexions and jetty black hair are not in fashion this season, and I have been informed that eyes of so deep a grey, set under such forbidding black brows, strike terror into the beholder, even when they are beaming with benevolence, which my eyes seldom do. Now, I think I have dealt with that subject. Shall we turn to business?" At Fletcher's suggestion, I made my will. I had no intention of dying for a good many years, but I realized the hazards of travel in such unhealthy regions as I proposed to visit. I left my entire fortune to the British Museum, where Papa had spent so many happy hours. I felt rather sentimental about it. Papa might just as well have passed on in the reading-room, and it would possibly have taken the attendants more than 2 days to realize he was no longer breathing. My last act before departing was to engage a companion. I did not do this for the sake of propriety. Oppressed as my sex is in this supposedly enlightened decade of 1880, a woman of my age and station in life can travel abroad alone without offending any but the overly prudish. I engaged a companion because, in short, because I was lonely. All my life I had taken care of Papa. I needed someone, not to look after me, but the reverse. Miss Pritchett was a perfect companion. She was a few years my senior, but one never would have supposed it from her dress and manner. She affected dainty frilled gowns of thin muslin, which hung awkwardly on her bony frame, and her voice was a preposterous high-pitched squeal. She was clumsy. Her stupidity was so intense it verged on simple-mindedness. She had a habit of fainting, or at least of collapsing into a chair with her hand pressed to her heart whenever the slightest difficulty occurred. I looked forward to my association with Miss Pritchett.